Now I am very pleased to introduce Sam Roberts. Sam is a co-founder of Indiecade and the festival director, as well as a professor at University of California at Irvine and formerly at USC. He's amazing, and we're really lucky to have him here talking about ideation, and he can also introduce himself a little further, but you're all lucky to hear from him. He's great. Okay.
Thank you, Stephanie and Parker. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. Like Stephanie said, I'll give you a little bit more of an introduction, not too much. She covered the big points, but I've been working in the game industry for 20 years as a writer, narrative designer, game designer, producer, along with everything I do for Indiecade and at USC and now UCI instead. In that time, I started an independent game studio called Codename Games. We did games on Sony PlayStation Home and the iPhone and Android, and for Facebook. Stephanie was a part of that company as well. I've worked for a bunch of clients. I typically do design research. That means I solve or pose troubling problems that can be solved through design, typically around games. What can a game on this platform look like? How can we make a game that does this, right? This idea of designing games to address problems, to inform, to draw attention to is very closely related to that. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys about ideation today. I know we're already quite a bit behind schedule, so I'm going to try to keep it to a reasonable amount of time. But those of you who've met me before know that I talk a lot, so we'll see how it goes. I hate slides, but I have a couple of images that I will share periodically, and then I will stop sharing my screen. Here's my slide that says, look, ideas. Because it's a light bulb, right? So what is ideation, right? That's why we're here to talk about. That's what you're going to be doing all week. Like, what do we mean when we say it's time to ideate, right? So ideation to me is the process by which we fill up our bucket, right? When we start a project, we've got a big blank whiteboard or empty space, empty brain, wherever we like to do our work, right? And maybe we've been given some constraints. Maybe there's some things we've been kicking around for a while. We're like, I'd like to make a game about boop, 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 boop. But our bucket's empty, right? And the tough thing when your bucket is empty is you can't work on stuff. You can't test things. You can't decide if a thing might work or not. So before we can prototype, before we can do extensive research, before we can ask ourselves, does this fit or does that fit? We have to fill the bucket with ideas. And that is the core of what ideation is about. I want to stick with this topic for a bit of a longer second. Has anybody seen this before? Do you all know what this is? Anybody? Okay, this is called the double diamond of design. You may or may not see it in design classes you take. It is much more common in product design. I first became familiar with it reading The Design of Everyday Things, which is a lovely book that I highly recommend to anyone engaged in a design field, games, product, architecture, whatever. This double diamond is the general structure of what a design process that is human-oriented needs to go through. And human-oriented is what's really important to us. We are game designers. Games do not exist unless they are played by a person. This is why we playtest all the time, right? Playtest is our opportunity to get input from human beings on what we think will work out of our design and test whether or not it works. This double diamond is a fractal process that reflects our need to continually go back to the human, go back to the user, and get input. You'll see it has this divergence, convergence, right? Now, typically the double diamond is presented as, what is the problem we're solving? Let's find that. And then how do we solve it? And let's figure out the solution. And what the diamond itself represents, you'll see on here, it says divergence, and then it says convergence. This is ideation and prototyping testing writ large. When we start, we have something we want to attack. We want to make a game about climate disasters, okay? But our board is empty. So first we have to engage in a divergent design process, a divergent thinking process to fill up our whiteboard. We need to go from no ideas to many, many ideas that all grow from the thing that we are trying to address, right? We'll talk in a second about lots of ways to fill that up, right? And then convergence is once your board is full, you have to go through it and say, what are the good ideas? What are the ideas in here that are the same that we should combine? What are the ideas on here that these are leading to? What are the ideas that I think might be cool, but now I need to test? I need to find out if this will work for humans. I need to find out if this works. I need to find out if this fits what's going on, right? So when you are divergently designing the problem, this is when ideation is at its strongest. Now, I said at the beginning, design's a fractal process, right? So we ideate at the beginning of each diamond. And there's not just really two diamonds. These two diamonds are made up of infinite diamonds all the way down, right? At the very beginning of your process, you will diverge and converge and diverge and converge. During ideation itself, even though it is a divergent process, we may make prototypes to generate new ideas as we divergently solve our problem. And to close our ideation phase, to hit the deliverables we've asked for this week, you will need to converge your whiteboard of ideas into the rubrics deliverables, right? Primarily like design goals for the player, a look and feel for the game, and suggested mechanics, right? So we're going to ideate what all those things are, and then you're going to take a process to start converging them. It won't be finished. You'll converge it down till you think you know what your game is, and then you will start to ideate again as you develop prototypes, as you fill them up with your research. Stop the share. You can look at my face again. I've been doing a lot of stuff with my hands you probably can't even see. So who knows? I talk with my hands a lot. Okay, so we are here to talk about ideation, the beginning of the double diamond, and in the broad writ process, the first phase. You can look at that double diamond as the four phases of this jam, right? Week one ideation is the first divergence. Week two prototyping is the second divergence. The first convergence. Week three, which is production, is the second divergence, and then polishing and FQA is the second convergence, bringing it all back together. Right. So where do we get all these ideas from? Oh, where can we find this stuff? Everywhere. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's a terrible answer, but it's also a real answer. I know that last week, Celia Pierce spoke to many of you about the idea of play search, right? Or research of games, right? And I know MJ just spoke to you extensively about hard scientific data and looking at it, right? These are both places where you can find ideas, be inspired by, oh, this research is really compelling and I would love to learn more about it. That game was so amazing and I'd love to make a game like that. One of the best things you can do in an ideation process is the very beginning, you might just be writing down games you'd like to play or big problems in climate you might like to solve. But then you should be engaging in research. And a huge part of your research is to turn big ideas that are vague into specific ideas, often by tearing those things up into components. I like Hollow Knight. Well, I'm not going to just write, well, I'm going to start by writing Hollow Knight on my board, but I'm going to come back and I'm going to cross out Hollow Knight and I'm going to write things like 2D, exploratory, combat oriented, beautiful art style, mood, whatever is exciting me about Hollow Knight, right? This is how I start to diverge those ideas as I dig into something that seems like one idea and I crack all the stuff in it and I pull it out. When I'm excited about a problem in the real world, I might look at that and try to figure out what's the component pieces of that problem. If I'm interested in toxic rainfalls or drying up rainfalls, maybe I need to look at water sources, pollutants, right? What are the smaller ideas that I can begin to fill up my board? And again, this is all fractal. So once I fill up my board with smaller ideas, oh, instead of like toxic rain, I've written pollutants. Well, now I can dive into pollutants and break that down into other smaller things and follow them up with research, right? So much of ideation is brainstorming and then using research to expand that brainstorm until you find gold. It's like panning in a river, right? You're going to get all this stuff and then you're going to go through it looking for the good stuff. How do you know what the good stuff is, right? This, we can use a bunch of tools in our designer's tool belt, right? We can make a prototype. Not a big, complicated prototype that takes a lot of time. A simple, small prototype. It can be a paper prototype. It can be not even a paper prototype. I can sit down with a friend or a stranger and talk them through an experience and see if it excites them or doesn't. Would you want to play something like this? Let's role play our way through this game without a lot of hard mechanics, just using a deck of cards or some dice or some tarot cards or something that is easy at hand, that we both know how it operates, and I can narratively shape into being this system or idea that I'm looking for. For me personally, one of my favorite ways to do this, to be inspired by ideas from the real world and then break them down, is I look for systems. I am obsessed with systems. I teach systems. I think systems are beautiful. And I think a lot of serious, hard problems in our world are systemic problems. And the way we analyze systems is we start to try and think of them as components and relationships. And this process of saying, oh, this thing is interesting. What are its components and the component relationships in it? And what's interesting about those is a wonderful way to build up your ideative process. I love it in particular, though, because it is right next to game design, which is a very systems-oriented craft. And as you start to extract components and relationships from the real world or from other games you like, you can reassemble those into new systems using the same components and the same relationships that explore new ideas, right? And that this out and in during ideation of like, what is cool? How can I analyze it and break it down into small pieces? How can I remix those and test those with people until I find a new system or a representation of a world system or a mechanic or a game inspiration or a problem that is truly exciting, that the component pieces of it are exciting me, that I can see how they can come together. This is when we can start to extract. So this might be my game idea. The end of ideation, you will have a game idea. It won't be your final game. Even in a game jam like this, it's going to change as you go through the prototyping phase, as you go through the production phase, even the polish phase. You're going to do more of these diamonds again and again and again, each with their own little ideation phases. They're going to add new stuff. How many people here have made a game and, in week 8 of a 10-week project are like, oh my God, we need to add this whole new thing, right? Everybody's done that. It's constant in games, right? The idea behind a double design process, behind understanding this fractal nature, is knowing that that's going to happen. What we want to do is continually output, this is our plan. We're going to update this as we continue to design, right? But we want to keep on targeting convergence towards this is the idea before we blow it up again and get tighter and more focused on what's going on. So at the end of ideation, what reflects a plan is probably the question that you would like to ask. And for those interested in like thinking about real world systems or game systems and diagramming them to cut them up and look at them again, I super just recommend Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows or Advanced Game Design by Mike Sellers, or preferably both. Um, so what are the outputs that you need to be targeting at the end of ideation? Right? You can engage in this process, but the process can be infinite. As game designers, one of the things we do for ourselves, we give ourselves deliverables so that we don't just keep expanding and contracting and expanding and contracting forever. Now, you have a rubric, so you have some fixed deliverables there, right? You're looking for this is our games mechanics. This is what our game is going to be about. This is the data or problem that we're solving, and this is what it's going to look like, right? I tend to recommend your goal be these sorts of things that I'm about to tell you. Wait, have I been skipping my images? On, don't. Yeah, okay. So let's talk about a couple of tools I use constantly in game development process that are often ideation outputs for me. So I want to show you guys a really stupid picture because I like stupid pictures. Um, that's Johnny Depp. He's super beautiful. He is also holding a razor. um, my friend Charles Babb loves to talk about an idea called razor statements. And a razor statement is a statement, a pitch, a concept, a single sentence that encapsulates the idea of a game. This is a wonderful output to target at the end of ideation. It can be iterated as your game changes, but it is a way for you to concisely say, this is my game and what it's about. But why do we call it a razor statement, Sam? Why are we looking at beautiful Johnny Depp right now? It doesn't make any sense. Aha. um, we call it a razor statement because the idea is you're going to have a million great ideas continually as you make this game. And what you will need if you want to make the game you're targeting at the end of ideation is a way to test every idea you have, is a way to check the feedback from your human-centered testing to make sure you're on track. Something that you can say, oh, it either is doing this or it's not. And that's what we call it a razor statement. A razor lets almost nothing through, right? The thing that's amazing about a razor is you can get a really close shave, unlike what I have right now, which is quite sloppy. Um, a razor only lets the barest, most focused, most on point ideas through. A razor statement is something that we can test every idea the team has, that we can test every output against and say, does it fit under the razor, right? Am I making a Hollow Knight inspired game about salmon and how they have to swim upstream every year and how we are disrupting that natural ecology by shoving hundreds of thousands of them into farms instead of letting them be in their traditional rivers, or by overfishing the source where the eggs are so not enough come back. Okay, that wasn't a good razor statement because I've had an or in there and it sort of went on, but I could narrow that down, right? I could say I am making an action Metroidvania about freeing salmon from farms so they can repopulate rivers. Boom, that's a razor statement. And every idea I have for the rest of my game, I can test. Is it doing those things? Is it about salmon? Is it a Metroidvania style mechanic? Is it about freeing salmon? Does it involve farms or rivers or spawning? No? Throw it out. It doesn't fit in my game. It doesn't fit in my game. It doesn't fit in my game, right? I highly recommend aiming for a razor statement at the end of this ideation process. Another common tool that we use in game design is, and this is another super stupid picture, but at least it doesn't have Johnny Depp, uh, is the design pillar, right? Everybody here has had somebody talk to them about a design pillar, right? Now, design pillars are a little bit different than a razor statement. A design pillar isn't a test. It isn't like fit through this gate or you are gone. A design pillar is an orientation. One of my design pillars for this game is that it is easy to pick up and use because I want a wide, massive audience, right? And so every time I have a new idea, I'm testing something, one of the things that I can test is that pillar. Am I making this game as easy to use and as approachable as possible? I might have a design pillar that is, I want people who play this game to understand the salmon's loop. I was going to say ecological loop, but that's not the loop I'm talking about. You know, their life cycle. That's the loop, right? I want my game to convey clearly the salmon life cycle, right? And then that becomes a design pillar. You make other choices based on how much they support your pillars. Oh, should we do this? Does it support any of our pillars? No, no. I have two good ideas. Is it idea A or is it idea B? Well, which one supports our pillars the best, right? This is what ideation is about. It's about giving yourself a concept and then design tools to hold your process to that concept. It's why we ask for a production schedule. You're not ready technically for a production schedule yet. You got a prototype to figure out what the game even looks like and what its pieces are going to be and figure out how long they're going to take, okay? But you want a starter schedule because you need to have a roadmap that you are asking questions about and updating and using to focus your process. If you get through prototype and you're like, this prototype is brilliant, but it means we need 3 months to make the game, then it probably won't work for this game because it's not going to fit in your production schedule, right? You got to turn it in like 4 weeks. No chance. Can you use this idea and scope it so that it fits, right? These constraints, these outputs that I am suggesting you use ideation to target, a razor statement, design pillars, and then the things we've asked for, player experience goals, a schedule, and an art style feel. Um, these are things that will then, there are constraints that you will have to continue shaping your project towards as you go. When you do new divergence processes, the way you keep that focused and moving forward towards an end goal is by putting constraints on your divergence. Great question. Razor statements absolutely can change, but you shouldn't change them constantly and a lot. I like to think of them as being iteratively updated. We'll change this word for this word. We'll include this concept because it's important. We'll cut this concept because it turns out it is no longer important. They should be iteratively developed, not thrown away and replaced. The same thing is true of design pillars and player experience goals, your schedule, and your art style. One thing that you will do during this ideation process, including talking about systems and games you're excited about, real world problems and environmental issues you're excited about, what are looks you're excited about? How is our game 2D? Is it 3D? Is it black and white? Is it color? Is it sketched? Is it photorealistic? Is it look like an anime? Does it look like a Scooby-Doo cartoon, right? Like, what is the look and feel that informs all the rest of this, that works with your pillars to achieve the goal of your game, that fits within the razor statement, right? These things are all interrelated. Ideation is about filling this whiteboard up with ideas and then attacking those ideas, getting deep in them, combining them, testing them if possible, so that you can output these core ideas that will help shape your process as you move forward. Yeah, so those are the big points I wanted to hit. I'd actually love to answer more questions right now if anybody has them. I also totally talked for a long time, even though I promised I would keep it short. So, um, yeah. Oh, there's a chat. Let's look here. Stephanie, Double Diamond, Mike Sellers. Yep. Danella's book, and then the razor statement. So yeah, does anybody else have any other questions about what it is to ideate? Do you need any advice on where to begin? I think again, the talk on research, which if you didn't get to see live, I believe there's a recording of it. I highly recommend watching it. That sort of play search, these games are great. They evoke the feelings I want. They make people think about ideas the way I want. That's a great place to start for filling up your whiteboard with mechanics, with components that might be in your game. And often when I do systems modeling, I will take a real world system component and try to map it onto a game system component, right? Oh, well, salmon lay eggs. And I'm thinking that this might be a platformer, and lots of platformers have collectibles. Maybe my salmon eggs are my collectibles. Does that lead me to a valuable idea? All right. How does a raise statement differ from an elevator pitch, and are they meant to be similar? This is a great idea. They are often similar, but they don't have to be and aren't meant to be. They serve different purposes. They are similar in that they are short and concise and need to be well understood, right? But an elevator pitch is something that you can quickly tell to someone who has no familiarity with your project at all so that they grok it, so that they can get what you're doing, okay? A razor statement is something that people working on your game need to check their work and make sure it is going towards the goal of the game. Um, how do you handle creative blocks? Is a wonderful question, Dylan. Scream in agony and slam your head on the table. Once you're done with that, um, I often switch to a different part of the project. It doesn't need to be a wildly different part of the project. But if I'm like, I can't find what's exciting to me about an environmental problem, or I can't figure out what my razor statement will be, or design pillars are evasive, I will switch and work on something else that is related from a different angle and let whatever is happening around that block stew in the back of my head, be informed by these other things. If I can't figure out what's exciting about salmon right now, I can go and think about what's exciting about the look of my game. And one of those things might get me excited about something about salmon. Like, I'm like, you know what? Salmon are these pink orange color, and it's sort of weird, but it's kind of cool, and I think I want to make sure that my whole game has this sort of pink orange aesthetic. I wonder why salmon are pink orange. And now I might go look up the science about that, right? Have you ever heard someone say, when you buy the farm raised salmon at the store, it doesn't have as much color? Why would that be, right? And now I've like, by working on another problem, I've cracked open another issue that I'm having. And maybe there's more rich stuff in there that I can start throwing up on the board, uh, filling up the whiteboard full of ideas that's helping me drive forward. Can I apply these concepts to some idea that already exists so that it is still maintained but is now flexible? Absolutely yes, right? These are just design tools. So if you already have something you're interested in doing, a game that you're passionate about that you want to make something like, an environmental issue you're passionate about that you want to write about, a picture in your head of what the game should look like, okay? Those can simply be constraints on this ideation process. They're not as tight constraints as we're asking you to output at the end of the ideation process. But if you've already got some of these constraints and ideas, use them right now as you fill up the board. And what does it look like to use a constraint to fill up a board? It often means posing it as a question. Yes, I'm circling right around to it. You have guessed here, Chris, right? So if I'm looking at my whiteboard and I know that I'm excited about this idea, I can ask questions about that idea. And those questions, I might come up with answers or new questions or places to look. And all that stuff gets to go on my board. Okay. I think one of the most important things that all of these elements can give you when you leave ideation and go to prototyping, when you exit the first divergence of the double diamond and go into convergence, is questions. As game designers who play test, who do human-centered design, who use double diamond design, we are scientists. And we use the scientific method. We just don't call it that. And what a scientist does is they have a question they want to answer, they make a hypothesis about what that answer will be, and then they test it with an experiment. We want to know if we can do this thing with our game. We develop a prototype that we think we'll see if we can do this thing with our game. And we have people play it and we observe and their play process and interview them afterwards to discover if our hypothesis was correct and it solves our design problem. We're scientists, right? And all these tools will give you questions so that next week, when you are like, let's make prototypes, you're not just trying to make the whole game, but as a prototype. Instead, you're making prototypes that answer questions that your ideation process produced so that you can iteratively refine that idea and that plan. So that at the end of prototyping, you know a bunch of answers and you can have solid pillars that you've exploded a bit and use them as a true roadmap during production. Other questions about that or anything else? I'm glad I gave you some light bulbs. I gave you a light bulb at the beginning of the talk. So it's all, it was all a plan, I promise. Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you, as always, Stephanie, for inviting me, Indiecade, for planning this awesome jam. I'm so excited to see so many people here making games. We have mentors who are going to be available to give you feedback. You can get feedback from them during this part of the process. Like I said, I know prototyping starts next week, but don't be afraid to make really small prototypes and ask questions about the that you are having right now as you drive towards a sort of set of questions, pillars, and these outputs we've asked for that will help you shape your prototype and eventually your product. I'm super excited to see all these games, and I wish you all the best of luck this week.